I honestly think I'm just gonna keep on shilling Wistoria until the cows come home because this show is just absolute gas. It is nothing but banger after banger, and I was told last week that if they adapt it properly, the remaining season is just gonna be just pure adrenaline, which I was a little skeptical. I mostly believed, but I was a little skeptical because I'm like, damn, given everything we've seen, I wouldn't be surprised if they wrap it up in a couple episodes, but no, it just... The deeper they go, the crazier it gets, and the fact that they're out here directing sequences the same way Ufotable would direct a Fate action sequence. What did we do to deserve such a wonderful production and a beautifully written story? You know, I have those full live reactions over on Patreon. If you want to see my full and good thought to any of these wonderful story episodes, it's going to be over there exclusively. So, there is so much that happened, but the biggest surprise... Not that I didn't expect something like this to happen. I expected Wignall was going to, at some point, not be such a D-bag elf. But I actually appreciate that pretty quickly into this episode, after a little bit of backstory info dump, we see that him and Will aren't that off. I mean, for Will, he's just more of a human who couldn't do what is expected of him in terms of magic. But for an elf, who basically... can make some pretty illusions, but not actually do anything past that, where all of his people are ascending. I mean, we're essentially dealing with a character who is trying to tell our MC that he's pathetic and not strong. And that very much could come across as a woe is me when you're regarded as one of the strongest in the current year. But the idea of how pretty much they are just the leftovers, I completely get it. Immediately it makes me say, like, I understand. And there was a moment last week that was, you know, kind of highlights the elven mentality that I just am not a fan of, and that is that they're better than you. And when anyone tries to reach out for your hand or touch you, like, that is a right reserved for special people. And I love the fact that towards, like, the second act of this episode, obviously Will puts out his hand. They kind of come to a mutual agreement, and just the idea that there's no more of that BS. The elves left him behind, and I'm glad that he's leaving behind that toxic attitude in the process, because this was a character that was a douchebag. And I know, I am a big hater of Julius, and Julius has now become a comedic relief character, and I'm completely okay with that. Make him a joke and a meme, but if you ever expect me to truly like him, you underestimate my hater capabilities and what I will do out of pure spite. A character like Wignall was a character that I totally expected would have a wake-up call, but they did it in such a natural way in this episode that just kind of had me come out saying, like, I really appreciate it, especially because, you know, Will admits in this episode that he's always admired him, so the idea that this is a character that maybe has said some mean things as of late, but it's not like this was a character who his entire school life treated him like garbage. You know, he was pretty much more of, he just existed around me. And the idea of understanding where he's coming from is a very powerful narrative tool to get them to pretty much work together. And they actually brought the collective group together in a relatively quick fashion. The first group we meet up with is, of course, Sion as well as Julius. And then obviously we meet up with the girls who are dealing with the final boss who, can you imagine this? Imagine thinking you're looking at your teacher, and then he puts the head off, because it's a dual-hon, puts the head back on, and then breaks it. With a single grip, explodes your teacher's head in front of you. Like, what the fuck? And then you get dragged away like it's a comedy scene, as they then, I don't know what is gonna happen there. It's not looking good, though, because they end up summoning the Duke of the Evil Bastards, and apparently that thing's worth like 200 and some odd credits. All I'm saying, though, is I truly hope they end up all passing, because Will needs a shit ton of credits, but I would hope that the school would be like, damn, you guys went to the 10th floor and survived. That's a pass for this year. Who cares about the credits? Because are they collecting crystals that get dropped? Like, no, like, that's some bullshit. Like, you pass the boy Wonder and his pals if they come out of this one alive. It's mind-blowing. There's so many moments, too, that are just so wonderfully produced. The initial shot starting the episode with the backstory of seeing him get left behind. The entire camera work there literally felt pulled out of a Fate anime, just so wonderfully done. There's a moment when Julius gets grabbed by Sion and just gets, like, thrown around. All those little moments are just so insanely well produced. And I think there's definitely these people who try to argue that people watch a show like Wistoria just because of the wonderful production. And no, the wonderful production is definitely a highlight and a selling point. But what has been the majority of what I talked about in this episode already? It's the characterization and what they're doing for the characters. That's what makes it great. And then when you add in that action, that's when it really starts selling. There is one weird thing that I saw last week, a little in my comment section, a little outside my comment section, just on different posts. And that is people saying this felt too similar to Don Machi. And that makes, honestly, zero sense to me. So, the similarity is that the author is very good at throwing characters in despair, deeper and deeper into a situation that, continuously expands. I mentioned it last week myself. But this doesn't feel like a Don Machi arc. This just feels like Wistoria in a deeper and deeper situation. Just because there's elements that are similar to his previous work doesn't mean it just feels like, oh, the author's doing the same thing. When you compare Belle and Will as characters, they are the most polar opposite characters known to man and do completely different things. And when you look at the 20 things that this show has done vastly different than Don Machi, and this comes from someone who loves Don Machi. I love where the later seasons have gone, and I'm incredibly excited for the new season starting in fall. But at the end of the day, Don Machi has very little in common with Wistoria. Sure, they're both action anime. Sure, currently they both had a dungeon arc. But at the end of the day, like, nothing about the functionality of this show is anything similar to Don Machi. Will ain't out here picking up girls in a dungeon. He's out here picking up bromances in a dungeon. And despite me memeing that whole dynamic there, at the end of the day, this doesn't feel like a carbon copy of Don Machi. It just, like, if having elements makes you the same as something that came before, then we should be watching literally no anime, playing no video games, watching no new movies, because nothing would be original. Because if something has guns, then it's just the same as that one war movie. If something has a fantasy setting, then it's the same thing as the first fantasy anime that came out in the 80s. You see where I'm going with this? Like, we have to accept that there's ways to be different, and this shows characters and casts and actual dynamic. Like, the entire concept here is that these two bastards are causing a ruckus to bring down the barrier in the sky, and there's a whole credit collecting thing. This is completely different than Don Machi, and it's kind of insane that some people just see a dungeon and, just say like, oh, because they got thrown deeper into it, it's just the same arc but recoded. When the emotions, the characterization, and everything that's going on with the dialogue is completely different. But I just wanted to get that out of the way. It's not that it made me upset. I was just very confused by some people last week, and I just wanted to throw my 2 cents out there on the matter. Of course, that's my feelings. Let me know what you're thinking down below. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new around here. Of course, ring that bell. And like I mentioned, we have full live reactions over on Patreon. And hey, while you're over there, I'll also give you a video shout out. Alright, so today we got Vincent Granville, Francis Mondra, Brendan M. Gibbons, Neko Chibi, Jacob Darkfire, Min Young, June 96, Miguel Francis, Dark Lord Dashi, and we also have Kim Andre Olsen. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care, and y'all have a good one.